Hello, we are going to be talking about the various parts of the human eye. In the video description, I have included a link to this diagram which you can use to follow along as I describe the various parts of the human eye. And I have included an outline which lists the order in which the various parts of the human eye are discussed. First, we have the cornea. This transparent layer is responsible for bending or refracting about 2/3 of all light that passes through the human eye. The cornea is unique in that it's the only part of the human eye that can be taken from a dead person and grafted onto a living person. The other outer layer of the human eye is the sclera. This tough, white, and opaque layer basically protects all of the eye in which it covers. Notice how I kind of bend when sometimes I bend off target when I point to a various part on the diagram. That's in part because the camera is refracting light as I am looking at the camera. So this camera is kind of refracting light similar to how a cornea bends light. Next we have the aqueous humor. This watery-like fluid is responsible for maintaining the shape of the human eye by keeping it inflated and also nourishing surrounding parts of the human eye. A good way to remember this is that aqua means water, much as how water is a fluid that keeps all living things alive. The aqueous humor keeps various parts of the human eye alive. Also, in anatomy and physiology, humor is another term for fluid. The other type of fluid found inside the eyeball is the vitreous humor. This jelly-like fluid helps give shape to the posterior chamber or back chamber of the human eye. A good way to remember that posterior means back is think of posthumous and something left behind. Posthumous means dead, but means something like left behind, no longer with us. The posterior chamber is behind in the human eye. Next, we have the colored portion of the human eye, or the iris. Basically, the iris enlarges or shrinks the human eye, the human pupil, given on whether more or less light is needed. If more light is needed by the human eye, the iris enlarges the pupil. If less light is needed, the iris shrinks the pupil. Here is the round hole known as the pupil, which is, as I just said, is basically enlarged or shrunk depending on how much light is needed by the human eye. Have you ever seen somebody with their pupils dilating, the black dot in their eyes look like it's been enlarged to inhuman levels? That's basically so the pupil receives more light. Behind the iris and the pupil is the lens. This bends about 1/3 of all light passing through the human eye. It basically changes its shape, or in a process known as accommodation, based on how much and what kind of light is needed by the human eye, much like a camera lens. Here is the suspensory ligament, which is basically connects the lens to the ciliary body. The ciliary body basically changes the shape of the lens based on light needs by having its ciliary muscles pull on the lens. Here's the conjunctiva. Basically, if your eyes ever feel dry, itchy, and irritable in the morning, your conjunctiva is obviously not doing its job. The conjunctiva which lines the inner eyelids, and the sclera basically keeps the eyes moist by producing tears and mucus. Here we have the canal of Schlemm, which basically empties aqueous humor from the eye and deposits it into the bloodstream via aquatic veins. You see this dotted layer that's between the sclera and vitreous humor. This is known as the retina. The retina has photosensitive cells, or cells that respond to light. Basically, the retina takes light signals that strike it and help transfer it to the brain, where the brain then registers these light signals as information that become our vision. Up here is the ora serrata. The ora serrata is where the retinal cells and sclera meet. Basically, in the ora serrata, it transfers from simple, non-photosensitive cells to complex photosensitive cells. More into detail about the retina. This small, half-oval-shaped structure known as a macula luteae is basically responsible for most of the color vision that humans have. In the center of the macula luteae is the fovea centralis. Think, centralis sounds just like center, which basically that's what it means. The fovea centralis is responsible for a high acuity or high focus vision, responsible for tasks such as like driving or reading. So basically when the doctor or DMV is giving you a vision test with those series of letters going downwards and decreasing size, they're testing your fovea centralis. See this black line between like the retina and sclera? This is the choroid. This is where retinal cells meet up with blood vessels, and these blood vessels help keep the retinal cells alive with blood. Am I refracting again? Am I? Okay. Now, this line right here is the optic. Am I refracting it? Okay, see this thin line right here, like between the retinal layers? This is the optic nerve. This basically transfers light signals from the retina to the brain, where it's interpreted as information that makes our vision. You see this intersection right here? This is known as the optic disc, aka blind spot. It's where the optic nerve and blood vessels meet up. Basically, there is no light signals that can travel to the brain to produce vision. So basically it's a blind spot in that there's nothing here that can register as vision. Included in the video description is a link to the second part of this video, in which I discuss 3 diseases that affect the human eye. Thanks.